So, welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, here to support you in overcoming disordered eating and finding peace with food. So, today I have Dr. Allison Ash, a PhD level eating disorder recovery coach for women and families. Allison's work integrates her own recovery journey, research, trauma informed practice, and the holistic Restore framework that she developed across 25 years in higher education. So today, Dr. Allison is going to talk about the importance of community, relationships, and intentional support systems in recovery, as people often leave inpatient treatment or finish an allotted amount of therapy and are left to manage alone. So Dr. Allison passionately believes that having the right support and community in place can be life-changing for sustainable healing, and she's going to share practical examples of this. And she's going to weave together her personal experience, research on the role of connection in recovery, and lessons from her work with women and families navigating the long road of healing. So let's get to the conversation. Welcome, Dr. Allison Ash, to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Harriet. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And Alison, whereabouts in the world are you? You can just share with the listeners.
Yeah, I'm in the Chicago area, so it's a kind of a cool morning this morning. We're starting to get into fall a little bit, which is kind of a welcome place to be. So yeah, that's where I am.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you. And most of the listeners from this podcast actually are from the United States of America. So interesting. And the
Yeah.
UK listeners come second. So okay, so let's get into it. Are you okay if I call you Alison? Is that okay?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So I know one thing, as we talked about in the intro, that you're really passionate about is community and recovery. And we've sort of talked about how people often leave inpatient and or end their therapy and they're kind of like off the conveyor belt at the end, aren't they, with very, very little support. Now, I know you've had your own journey, haven't you, in recovering from an eating
Yeah.
disorder. And that has really sort of, from your own experience and then sort of community and network that you put together for your healing has then really empowered you to sort of do the same for others. So could you
Yeah.
just say a bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I just to tell you a little bit about my story, I had not had a diagnosed eating disorder really most of my life until my 40s. And then when I started processing some trauma that I had experienced as a child through an investigation that was happening into some childhood abuse that I decided to participate in. I did that, and then a lot of the PTSD came back, and just a lot of trauma came up and really developed an eating disorder for the first time in my 40s and really started to experience just a profound sense of isolation. I was a dean at a university at the time and really taking care of a lot of students. I oversaw all of the mental health services and the medical services at our institution and was helping students struggling with the same kinds of things that I was now starting to struggle with. And then just thought, how on earth do I tell people that I'm struggling with this when I'm the one taking care of everyone and really supposed to be in charge and have everything all together? So there's a lot to that part of the story, but in a sense, it really just created a profound sense of isolation. And then when I finally had to really, for a lot of important reasons, go into treatment to a treatment center, um, I found that there was a really wonderful sense of community there. And I really was surprised at how much support I felt there and that how helpful that was. But then I left, right? Then you leave
Yeah.
treatment and you have to leave and go back to your life. And it was really that when I knew, okay, I now have to kind of do this on my own, or at least with some support through therapy, that I just felt that huge gap in my own process. So I was really not in a great place and knew that I wasn't going to be able to go back into treatment because insurance just wasn't covering it anymore.
Yeah.
I found that there was this really difficult cycle of going into treatment, being unwell to the point that insurance would cover my treatment. I'd go into treatment, I'd get a little bit better, and then insurance would say, okay, we're not going to cover you anymore because you're a little bit better, and then was not recovered and then had to leave and do it on my own, and then was sick again and going back in. So it was the cycle of just trying to get better in a system that wasn't really working. So when I finally left treatment and I knew insurance was not going to cover it anymore, I was just not doing well. And I knew I had a dietitian at the time who was just became a dear person in my life and provider. And she really just said to me, Allison, you are at an age and your body is at a stage where if you don't do something, I'm afraid you're not going to make it. And I've been to my clients' funerals before, and I'm seeing you as the next one if you don't do something. And so I just I thought, I know the only way that I can recover and have the help I need is to empower my own community to help me. I saw people around me who maybe had physical challenges or medical struggles, and they would reach out to friends, they'd have a surgery, and their friends would bring them a meal. And it was just this sense of community that people had. But when it came to mental health struggles, or specifically my struggle, I was just keeping that hidden and didn't really want to tell people. So I decided to reach out to about 30 of my friends. And I said, I wrote this email, and my plan was to email them and set up an online system. I used a website that was used for other things, but I used it for this purpose, and set up a system to say, can you sign up for 1 day a month to be my support person? So that day, I would like you to text me at 8, 10, 12, 3, 6, and 8 p.m. So those 6 times when I'm eating my meals, because I just don't feel like I can do this on my own. So I drafted the email, and I was sitting there and I thought, okay, once I hit send, you can't take the email back. It's out there. So
Yeah.
so I sent the email to people and just said, this is how you sign up and this is how you can help me. And I thought, what if no one responds? What if nobody or maybe just one person or something. And the way the system was set up was that every time someone signed up for a day, I would get an email notification saying, someone signed up to support you for a day. So I sent the email, and within about a minute and a half, I got an email notification that someone signed up. And I thought, oh, at least one person signed up for my day. And then probably within about 2 hours, the whole month was full of people supporting me. And I was just completely overwhelmed with the support that people wanted to give me. And so really I did that for about a year, where I had every morning I would wake up and I would think, okay, who's my support person now? I kind of stopped looking at my calendar. I just waited for them to text me. And then sure enough, 8 or 8:30 every morning, I would get a text. Hey, hi, Allison. I'm the support person today. How's it going? Let's eat your breakfast. I would take a picture of my plate before and after I ate, and they would just send me texts like, you got this. You can do it. I'm supporting you. I know this is hard. Sometimes, if I'm honest, I wanted people to forget because I didn't always want to stay in recovery, right? I didn't always want to do the hard work, but they didn't forget. They kept texting me. And that was really ultimately how I recovered. So in a 3-year period of being in and out of treatment, having different kinds of providers and different treatments that were there, it was really that support of my community every few hours for a year that really helped to just bring me to that place of healing. So that's a little bit of my story.
Yeah, well, I think so. It's so interesting, and I think thank you for sharing as well. Like you said, you developed anorexia sort of later, an eating disorder later in
Yeah.
in your 40s, and so it sounds like that was a bit of a surprise, I guess, as well, hasn't it? I mean, I guess when you sort of say that, perhaps you were dealing with some trauma and it brought something to the surface that perhaps hadn't been dealt with, and it put you in that place. But yeah, I think it's just really validating for the listeners, because I think there's many people listening as well that go through that experience and feel very alone and even
Yeah.
more isolated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had been in a place in my profession up until even before I was a dean at that college university. I had been in helping professions most of my life, so I had been around a lot of struggle and sometimes trauma. And to be honest, a lot of people who had eating disorder, students I was working with, where I might have to make a decision. Are you well enough to go on this international trip with the school? And I would sometimes, work with students and think, come on, like just eat or just do this and you can go on this trip. And I didn't understand it. And then I found myself having in my 40s and thinking, wow, I have been seeing this most of my career. And now I am in the same position, which completely shifted everything. The day I walked
Mm.
into my treatment center, it was the most humbling thing. I remember walking in and seeing big letters at the top of the building, Behavioral Health Hospital. And I thought, at my institution where I work, I would be supervising everyone in this building. Like I would be
Mm.
ultimately overseeing the doctors, which is what I was doing at my institution. So the doctors, the counselors, and now I'm walking in as a patient and I have to
Mm.
really just receive this care. So it really was, I do want to validate for people who either have just had an onset of an eating disorder later in life, or they maybe struggled earlier in life, were better, and then these struggles reemerged. And it really can get help and you can recover from that, even if it's later in life.
Yeah, no, such a helpful message. And without going into the sort of specific, trauma or trigger, in terms of like how the eating disorder like helped you cope, or what sense of you make that you make of it psychologically, like how would you describe that? Like when you sort of look back on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I did a lot of work on that actually. I think one of the things that I've heard other people say, I've read in books that people have written, and that I definitely experienced was almost like why are these behaviors so compensatory for me? Why is this happening? Almost it felt like happening to me.
Yeah.
And why is my response this way? So I did a lot of really soul searching, doing a lot of work in therapy about that. And I think the best way I can describe it is that when all this trauma came up, it was so intense and so much to try to express. And I had a life, I had small children. I had a very, very intense job. And I was also actually working on my PhD at the time. So that was another thing that was going on. And I just thought, I thought I don't have time for this. I don't have time to deal with this trauma. And
Mm.
I definitely didn't feel like I had time to get fully in touch with the emotions and to express them,
Yeah.
and didn't feel like I had the place to do that. So I think what the eating disorder did was help to show through my body the pain that I was experiencing. Um,
Mm.
I I really believe a lot in internal family systems, therapeutic approaches. That was
Yeah.
something that I did. I also do with my clients now. But I experienced a lot of healing through that and really began to understand the eating disorder as a part of me, and a part that
Yeah.
was ultimately trying to help me
Yeah.
express myself and show to others this is how bad I feel. And as my body looked worse and worse, it was like I felt in some ways psychologically better and better to be able to show people now I'm finally expressing myself through my body.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, thank you for sharing that, 'cause I think it's yeah, it's unusual, I think, as well, sometimes as well, speaking to someone like yourself who has really perhaps been thrown into the eye of the storm there, and
Yeah.
then, and you've had a lot of therapy and you've come out the other side and helping others, but to really just so describe it in that way, because I think again it's very relatable, isn't it, to
Yeah.
people? And there's that
Absolutely.
kind of contradiction, isn't there? Because I think sometimes as well, we don't want people to see our pain, or we want to be
Right.
invisible with the eating disorder. But then
Yeah.
on the flip side, it is a way also of communicating, isn't it? When perhaps what can't be expressed through words, the
Yes.
body is communicating.
Yeah. It was almost like I probably needed to like scream from the rooftops, or like, I'm not okay. Like I'm not
Yeah.
doing well. And the more my body became sick and ill, it was like my body was doing that. It was
Mm,
it was saying I'm really not well. And then the worse it was, the more I felt like, yeah, that's actually more accurate of how I'm feeling right now.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing as well, like you say, going into treatment was a very humbling experience after having quite a long career and supporting others, making these decisions and, helping
Yeah.
people with their mental health. So again, I think, that sounds like a very humbling experience. But then I think also the fact that when you came out, that you really reached out to your community, because I guess there can be a lot of shame and isolation, can't there, and loneliness when you come out of treatment. You feel like maybe I should be fixed now, everything should be better. So was it like a hard decision to actually make that decision to reach out to people?
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I went, was, of course, my very close circle of family and friends who knew I was struggling. And then I would say, probably, if you think of concentric circles outside of, your close circle of friends and then friends and then all the way out to acquaintances, there were definitely a lot of people who just generally knew I wasn't working anymore. I had been in treatment, but I hadn't necessarily let them into that inner part of the inner circle of, really helping me. And I think where I had to come to this place where I thought, the eating disorder, as much as it does feel like it's helping me in some ways express myself, and in some ways that made me feel better
Yeah,
psychologically and emotionally sometimes, it was almost like the scales had tipped to the point of the good that I'm feeling from being able to express myself and feel a sense of peace from that is not as good as recovery looks. I knew
yeah,
that recovery was and living a life that I knew I wanted to live was more compelling
yeah,
than continuing in the eating disorder. And I say that in a way that might sound like, oh, I was just kind of sitting there and going, oh, yes, I want to live this life. It was a little bit more dramatic than that,
yeah,
mainly just because my body was just giving out. And I knew my dietitian at the time said, she said, Allison, I see you starting to recover and then going back and crashing. Sometimes I would end up in the ER or end up in a place where I just was not okay. And again, I didn't tell anyone. Nobody really knew that was going on. And then I would come back and then I'd be okay for a little while. And she said, people only have so many recoveries left in them. You only have so many recoveries, and you never know when you've used your last one.
Mhm.
And she said, you might recover again and bounce back, and you don't know it, but that was your last one, and you're not going to get another one. And I had a situation where I just was not well again. And her words were kind of ringing in my ear. And I just thought, I'm not able to be the mom I want to be. I'm not able to do the kinds of activities I want to do with my kids. And I just made a decision through a kind of a pretty dramatic situation. I just thought, I need to get better. And that was when I thought, okay, now I know I need to get better. I know the system of treatment, insurance dropping me, treatment, insurance dropping me. I can't do that anymore. And 1 hour a week of therapy is not enough.
Yeah,
So that's when I thought I saw people around me who maybe was struggling with cancer or struggling with some kind of a disease where it felt more socially acceptable to ask for help. And I thought, you know what? Even though it doesn't feel socially acceptable, I have to ask for help in that way. In the same way I would if I had a terminal illness, because I do have a terminal illness. And I need to be able to ask for help from people. So, yes, to answer your question, it was very humbling and very difficult because I felt like I needed to do three things. I tell people this sometimes when I'm speaking on this. I needed to be able to say to my close friends, I'm not okay. I need help. And will you help me? And those three statements were sound so simple, but they were so difficult to say to somebody, I'm not okay. I need help. Will you help me? But I think the power of us saying that to even just one person, starting with one person, can be completely life-changing. Um, when we want to isolate and keep it to ourselves, we're not able to receive the help from others that we need.
It was a powerful move, wasn't it? Stepping out and actually asking people, although that was like hugely challenging. And I guess what struck me as well is how people responded really warmly and willingly. And you had your support team in place fairly quickly,
Yeah,
didn't you? Like people want to help, actually, don't they?
they
They
do.
really do.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure we can all relate to times in our lives when something might be difficult, whether it's something like this or maybe something even not quite as complex, where somebody will say, what do you need? How can I help you? Or let me know how to help you. And people, and we know from when we say that to others that we actually want to help. People want to help others. So what I decided to do, and this is when I work with my clients, this is what I help them do, which is to train and equip your supporters. So I think I was probably old enough and had been experienced enough in helping professions. I was like, people just need direction. They need to know how to help. So if I just
Yeah.
said, hey, text me support, and I didn't give any direction,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have probably gone very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I said very specific things to people that I had learned in treatment. So treatment helped me with all the tools, the language that I needed, that then I could give those tools to my supporters. So when I sent that email and I used this website that I used for to mobilize my community, I had instructions in there like check out this website, read about eating disorders, and I put some do's and don'ts. I think I said don't ever say like wow that's a lot of food. Like don't say that
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's kind of triggering like oh gosh that's what the eating disorder is saying to me, so I don't want to I can't really hear that from other people. Or if you
Yeah.
see me, don't say wow you look good, you look like you're gaining weight. Like that's it's very intuitive to want to say to somebody you look healthy, I'm so happy you look healthy. But
Yeah.
for somebody who has that eating disorder mind, especially in the anorexic eating disorder mind, that fear of gaining weight is so much at the forefront
Yeah.
of everything that if you hear that from a supporter, it's just very triggering. So I said things like that. And I just said, these are the things to do and not do. And this is what you can say. Send me a quote, send me a verse of some kind, send me just an idea about what it means to have a life of recovery, to have a recovered life. Just and I just gave them tools and said, just do this. And then they did. And they did what I asked. And that was humbling, but they did want to help for sure. And it was so helpful.
Yeah, and it sounds it. And I think, yes, so helpful to be very specific about the help that is helpful because it's tough for carers, isn't it? I think to know what to do sometimes. And also, I think as individuals, we can all be a little bit different in terms of what really motivates us and what inspires
Right.
us. And I think there's just so much gold in that process. How you almost like you set it up really well, didn't you, actually? So it was going to be really a supportive scaffolding for you.
Yes, absolutely. And when I work with clients now, and I tell my clients this, and then if I'm talking to people supporting others, I will say to my client, so for example, I text with them a lot throughout the day now. I use the same techniques that I my supporters use with me, I use with my coaching clients. And in our sessions when we meet, I will say, okay, yesterday when I texted you, that text was that helpful? Because some people that's not helpful. Some people say, I want you to text me every day an inspirational quote. Another person will say, I don't want you to ever text me until I text you first because I feel like it's pressure. And so it's really very different for everybody that I have. So I think people, when they're wanting to receive help, being able to say specifically to the people who love us and care for us, this is the best way that you can help me. I love it that you want to help me, and I'm so appreciative of that. And this is the best way to do that because people want to know that, and that can just be good for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And with your support, it sounds like people were sending you like verses and you instructed them a little bit on helpful language and perhaps inspiring quotes and things like that. But was it primarily to make sure that you'd eaten your food? Like, was that the central bit of the
Yes,
support?
that really was. So I knew what I needed to do in that stage of my recovery is I needed to restore my weight. And I knew for me, the most difficult part of healing from anorexia was just restoring that weight. And so like I said before, I had a lot of tools from my treatment centers. I had just a lot of techniques through, I felt like I became almost could become an expert on all these different therapeutic techniques because I'd used them all. But now I just needed like really very practical help eating my meals. I
Yeah.
just knew like I need to eat and I can't do it on my own. I just absolutely have to have that support. And in treatment centers, I had the support. I had my providers. I had peers who were with me also. We were at tables together eating, and it was hard, but it was doable. But
Yeah.
when you're on your own, you're in your house and no one's around, and you're like, I can just do whatever I want, no one will know. And you have this eating disorder voice that's yelling at you, telling you what to do. I found that doing that on my own, I honestly don't know if I could have done it without
Mm,
that help because it was too hard to just completely do on my own. And so, but when I had those people saying, I'm here with you, I would send them, when I started my meal, I'd send them the picture. So I knew while I was eating, they knew that I was trying to do it.
yeah.
And then if I needed their help, I might text and say, I ate half. I don't know if I can do the rest. And then they'd say, yes, you can do it. And because I had 30 people and they only had to do 1 day a month,
Yeah.
they knew like I got the for this day. Now I
Yeah.
also work with people who have seven people and they have, a person has their supporters have 1 day a week. So I don't think people have to find 30 friends. Sometimes that's hard, but I having that, that support, that very practical support for eating from my supporters was really what got me through.
Yeah, no, sounds really helpful. And did you find as well, as time went on, did you become less dependent on your network? Because I guess what I'm thinking, because I think I hear so much that bridge from when you've got intense treatment to then like being on your own, like that's such an important bridge, isn't it, to be
Yeah.
offering that intermittent support. But I guess the danger maybe for some people is they could almost become very dependent on always having to check in with their eating and not be
Yeah.
doing it for themselves. So yeah, I just wonder your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned earlier that, every day for a year I had that. And I probably should make a correction. Your question kind of prompted me to remember that there were toward the end, I was starting to taper off of that
Yeah,
support. So I still had that support knowing it was there if I needed it.
yeah,
But I'm trying to remember. I think I might have toward the end when I would send updates to my supporters a lot.
yeah,
And I think it was saying like I don't need the support as much every day, or maybe it was less texting throughout the day. But you're
mm,
exactly right. It did start to taper off.
yeah,
And I remember sending the last update saying, I think I'm good. Like I
yeah.
appreciate what you did. In fact, I want to let them all know about this podcast so they can listen to it and remember. And say, look, I'm still using your support, for others, the betterment of others now. But yeah, it definitely was a tapering off. And I think that whole idea of really, really, really intense support that we need at the highest levels of treatment, and then tapering off, and then having the support of our community, and then really doing that on our own. Um, I would say probably my philosophy is that I always will need, and I think most of us in this work would agree, that we always need that support that's there if we struggle again, right? So if we're saying,
Mm,
I need you again, or I need the support again, I tell my clients that a lot, that really mobilizing your community is also saying, who is my go-to person? Because I might have challenges the rest of my life. And
mm,
I'm going to hopefully be in a place of recovery, but that doesn't mean that there won't be challenges. So yeah, being able to say, I needed that very, very strict support. But now I'm going to start tapering off and just come to you when I feel like I'm struggling more again.
mm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it sounds like it works really well for you actually, and then as you're sort of describing with many of your clients as well, it's really
Yeah.
got them to that much more empowered place and being autonomous and independent, I guess, with their eating, but
Yeah.
also being able to reach out to their support network again if needed, if having a
Yeah.
difficult day or going through struggles.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Um, I, one of the things with my clients when I start working with them, I use a framework for kind of assessing where are you in seven different areas, and one of the seven areas is engaging your community as a part of your recovery. So that's one of the parts that we assess when we first start working together, and then depending on where they are in that score, it helps us to understand how much we need to really work on that. Because some people might say, "I'm doing great." Like I have some clients who are younger and they're like my parents, my aunt and uncle, and then I have like a grandma, whatever. They're
Yeah.
checking in, every day. And that's wonderful. That's not as common, but that is great. So they're like, I'm doing great. And then we work on other things. But
Mhm.
other people might say, I don't really have anyone who's supporting me. There's no one. And then that's where we put a lot of our energy. But I will say all of my clients, if they're coming to me for help,
Yeah.
I will say, I want to work myself out of a job. So as much as I'm helping you right now, how can you then, both in your own sense of recovery and well-being, do some of this on your own, but still get support from people that you're not paying or you're not having to see me every week. And you're getting some of that support from your friends and your community because that real life happens at home,
Yeah.
at work, with friends, on weekends, in
Yeah.
a restaurant, at a table. That's where the real life is.
Yeah.
And so, how can you, when you're in that part of real life, how can you be engaging the people and how can people be engaging with you to help support you so you're not hiding from that?
Yeah. And I think as I'm listening to you as well, and sort of what's worked for you and what's worked for your clients, just this whole thing as well about really defining so clearly about what helpful support is. Because I'm thinking some people might listen to this, could listen to this and think, oh, I need to really, perhaps as a parent think, right, I need to be, or, I need to be really on this and like, badgering my person about how much weight they've put on and like, I don't know, getting into what we'd call, like we use the Maudsley animal model over here and we talk about the rhino, becoming, not wanting to become the rhino, staying more as the kind of the dolphin where you're very supportive and you're alongside, but you're also allowing the person to be empowered and direct their change. You're not being the rhino where you're trying to almost like force the recovery.
Yeah,
So I think that's a really important piece, isn't it? Because it sounds like you set up your support network in such a way that was really very empowering and beneficial for you, but it was very much led by you. And I think
right.
that's a really important message, isn't it? Because it's not about people just like jumping on the person in a way. Like if
Yeah,
people had all jumped in
yeah,
and given you help, but it wasn't very helpful, that could
right.
have actually been quite detrimental, couldn't it? Even if it came from such good intention.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have taken it. I would have just
Yeah,
isolated it more, and which is, I'm sure that happened some at the beginning of my process where I just thought, I'm not ready. I don't even know what I need. I don't even know how to tell people what I need. And I don't want to hear things that are going to make things more painful. So I just didn't say anything. But one of the first things I do with my clients when we're engaging in this part of our process is I have them write a letter that says, Dear supporter, and that we don't necessarily send this, we might edit it and amend it, but I have them write a letter
yeah,
that's really a letter that would say, if I could say anything to some of the closest people, parents, siblings, friends, partners, um, what would I tell them that I want and need? So they say, what do I need and how can you support me? And then another really important part of that letter is let's talk about how we will handle this if you do something that's not helpful,
sure.
because that is where it can break down. People can say, okay, I did the thing, I asked for help, and it didn't work. And then they give up. So, one of the most important things is being able to say, how will we handle this if you do something out of really good intentions that is not helpful? Because I know that
Yeah,
might hurt you for me to tell you, but it also might hurt me to not correct that if it's needed. So, those are two things. Then the third thing I have them do is write a letter to themselves. How will you handle it if a supporter that you had reached out to simply does not work.
Yeah.
And either they don't support you, or they decide not to, or you're like, this isn't working, they pull away, you pull away, because that happens too.
Yeah.
And again, those are the parts that can be the most painful because it's like, now I've put myself out there. How will
Yeah.
I handle that? So those are the three plans that we have. What do you need? How will you help correct your supporters if it's not working? And what will you do if it just doesn't work out with a particular person?
Yeah. No, so helpful, isn't it? So it's in a way, it's like really clearly defined, isn't it, at
Yeah,
the start? And
yeah,
that sort of scaffolding provides so much safety, doesn't it?
yeah,
Because of, I
yeah.
guess, with humans, things are always going to go a bit off piste sometimes, aren't they?
Right, right. Absolutely. That's just how we are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So, Alison, just say a bit more about your restore framework and, other things that you would do when you're supporting people.
Yeah, so I am technically a eating disorder recovery coach, and so I work with people and families. I have family coaching for people who want to, as a family, be able to work together, but I also do individual and group coaching for people who are healing from eating disorders. So the Restore framework is just a 7-part framework for us to be able to assess how are you doing in your recovery as a whole. So I won't go through the whole framework, but really, a lot of the treatment that I have found in treatment centers and with providers really focus on body image, on letting go of eating disorder behaviors, and really those are some of the two main areas. But then also kind of understanding emotions and their own emotions. But the part that I found both in my recovery and with others is there are additional components to people in their life that if they're still struggling in these areas, or the eating disorder is kind of holding on to these areas, that can be a hindrance, even if like their body image is getting better or they're surrendering their behavior. So for example, one of the parts of the Restore framework, every letter of Restore stands for a part of recovery. So the O stands for owning your purpose. And that I have found that there are times when people will say, I'm gaining the tools for my healing, but I just feel like my eating disorder has given me a sense of purpose I can't
Yeah.
let go of. So we talk about, okay, let's talk about purpose and how there's a purpose that can be more helpful and sustaining beyond the eating disorder. So we might work on that.
Yeah.
And then we find that when we work on that, that's actually a part of their healing, and that's the missing piece.
Yeah.
Or the last E of Restore stands for engage your community. So that's another
Sure.
one that I'll say, we really need to focus on that. The T stands for tend to yourself, so self-care.
Yeah.
But then there's also the S is for sustaining their spirituality. So how
Sure.
how do we use our sense of spirituality, both whether that's through organized religion or not?
Yeah.
How do we understand ourselves as spiritual beings, as people who we have a parts of us that need inner healing? So it's really, I like to explain it as a very holistic way of
Yeah.
approaching eating disorder recovery that goes beyond only behaviors, emotions, and body image. So and again, that just came from doing some research that I did about eating disorder recovery, but then my own experience, and then just seeing other clients and saying, this is what I think if we are missing any one of these seven, it's hard to sustain recovery, ongoing and lasting recovery.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying there because I think that kind of purpose bit is so important, isn't it? Because the eating
Yeah,
disorder often does really bring that real sense of satisfaction and achievement, doesn't it? And,
it does, for
I sort of
sure.
think linking to the spirituality bit as well, I always say to my clients, I do believe we're here for more than to control our food and,
Exactly.
we are here for,
Yes,
more exciting things, but
yes,
it's tapping into that, isn't it? Because I totally agree with you in a way. Like we need to work on the behaviors, but actually, if it's not for something bigger, sometimes, or perhaps being connected to something bigger, or just having that more holistic view, it's
yeah.
quite hard to sustain recovery, I think.
I think it is too. And I do think getting those behaviors under control when it's just kind of willing yourself into like
Yeah,
eating or surrendering a behavior, that doesn't last, you know. That's when we get the relapse cycle in and out. So yeah.
Yeah. So, Dr. Allison, do you, as a coach, then, can you work with people all over the world, or how does it work in terms of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have clients England, I've worked with clients in Portugal, Spain, Australia. So I've worked with clients all over the world, and as a coach I can do that. And yeah, I find that people a lot of times what the benefit that people have said they have from our work together is I sometimes use this tagline is as if we're in therapy 1 hour a week, we have 167 other hours that we have to sustain our recovery. So lasting and the real work of recovery happens not only in the 1 hour, but in the other 167 hours. So when people
Mm,
say, I I can't do it on my own for 167 hours and I don't have people to support me that much. That's where I think I come in, and I think a coach can come in and say, okay, when you're struggling, let's text throughout your meal. Let's I do a lot of texting with my clients all day if they need it. So I don't usually take as many clients as maybe a therapist would, because I
yeah.
just take more time with each person. And then we work on goals every week and very specific goals related to the Restore framework. And then we're texting about that and how are those going. So so that's the work that I do is with, yes, people all over the world, and that very hands-on practical help throughout the day.
Sure. Well, that's great to know about, isn't it? Because it's almost like the equivalent to what you get in the UK, maybe it was almost like a day patient program, that has
Yeah,
still got quite a level of intensity.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So where can people find you if they want to get in touch and find out more about your work?
Yeah, probably the best way is through my website. So it's allisonash.com. So it's ALLISONASH, allisonash.com. I'm also on social media. Allison Ash Recovery Coaching is my Instagram. And I'm on Facebook as well, just my personal Facebook, which you can find through the other areas. But I do like to, I love writing blogs or newsletters where I'm giving tips and everything for eating disorder recovery. So people, if they go on my website, they can sign up to receive those things and subscribe, and then they can receive things for free. A lot of that is free, but then there's other things that people can also find on my website, journals and different things for their healing and different levels of healing. So probably the best way is through my website or social media.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I shall make sure like those details are in the show notes for people that want to reach out to you. Um,
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I
that'd
just
be
like
great.
to, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think you do offer a very unique perspective, actually, and some really important help, which is not offered
Mm,
universally in eating disorders. So I think thank you just for highlighting that and for the work that you're doing. Because I think more of this sort of support is needed, actually, the sort of more intense support, bridging that gap for people.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And well, thank you, Harry. And I just want to say, I know your listeners know this, but I just so appreciate what you do for the eating disorder community. I mean, there are a few people that do more than you do. And I have all your stuff. I get all your emails and read them all the time and listen to your podcasts and watch them. And you've just done incredible work for years in this world. And I just really appreciate you. So thanks.
Oh no, thank you. I mean, I just think like I just sometimes feel I'm kind of like the the spoke almost like, I kind of reach out to people and get them on and
Yeah.
then
Well, that's great. I
so
appreciate it.
but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.